Since it's been added, people have been asking me about my thoughts on the use of main power-up on the brushes. For those unaware of what exactly main power-up does, it increases the roll speed of both the octobrush and the ink brush. Doesn't sound too bad, right? Seems like it'd be helpful, right? Sounds good in practice, but actually there's a few issues with the idea of using main power-up, and I plan to go into those today. First off, I've been pretty vocal about my distaste for rolling around as a brush. Rolling around as a roller is rarely ever a good option, but surely brush is different because of the speed, right? Well, yes and no. Both brushes have a much faster roll speed in comparison to the rollers, but much like rolling around with the rollers themselves, you become a more obvious and bigger target. Even though you'll roll pretty fast, you're still no speed racer. You don't move at insane speeds, and your movement is still easily tracked by better players. This is where main power-up comes in, right? Using main power-up speeds up that roll, making it even quicker than before. What could be bad about that? This is where we go back to the whole being a bigger target point that I mentioned earlier. In general, rolling around is not an optimal way to move around the map. Swimming is, and always will be. By rolling, you actually expose yourself. You make a bunch of noise, and your tracks are very obvious to the enemy team. As a method of moving towards an enemy, you're easier to be shot than someone who's sitting in the ink. As a method of flanking, your path is visible if someone is looking at the map, or if someone just so happens to see your trail that you leave behind. That leaves using the roll merely as an escape option, and that's decent, right? Again, the big issue is how easily you can be shot while rolling. If you're trying to disengage, it's very likely that at that point you've already taken some damage, or you've been exposed to enemy ink a tad bit, making your health below 100%, which then, if you couple with the fact that you're an easier target, means that you're going to be killed before you can actually make your escape. I think my point is becoming pretty obvious. I'm not exactly a fan of rolling around that much. It has a much bigger downside compared to its upside. Granted, I will say that in my experience, it is based off higher level play. There's bound to be some people in lower ranks that will struggle to kill a brush that just so happens to be rolling around. So make note that what I'm saying might not completely convey exactly what you may experience in your lobbies if you might not happen to be playing in such a high level or at the higher ranks. You might be able to go around them, but once you're playing in higher ranks against people that have played a bunch and improved their aim and game sense, those plays become less and less viable. Now, I'm a bit known for working with some of the data and the in-depth stuff when it comes to these games, so I've looked into it and compared the travel speeds for the brushes with and without main power-up. I tested them based on having the brushes travel to reach the same point, and I timed how long it took them and compared them by frames. The difference between an octobrush with no main power-up and one main power-up is actually only 0.19th of a second when compared to running it without. That is, compared to running to the same object on the same point in the map, it only saves 19th of a second. 2 mains being 28th of a second, and 3 mains being 32 of a second. And before I continue, I want to mention these numbers are based off purely just rolling for this set period of time. Basically what I'm saying is, if you roll for these 3.5 seconds that I timed at, you're only going to be saving 11 frames for every 3.5 seconds that you are constantly rolling. This isn't accounting for going in and out of rolling or stopping between that point. This is for every 3.5 seconds. Using 1 main only saves you 11 frames, 2 mains saves you 16 frames, and 3 mains only saves you 19 frames. And like I've mentioned many times before, this game runs at 60 frames a second. So as you can tell, that's not really that big of a difference if you're not even saving half a second when you're rolling. For ink brush, it's 0.07th of a second with 1 main, 0.15th of a second with 2 mains, and 0.19th of a second with 3 mains. After looking at all this, it's become overly clear to me that the investment of main power-up for brushes just isn't that great. And it's sort of a shame that they ended up just going with increasing the roll speed only, but as of version 4.5.1, which is the version that is currently out at the time of recording this, the returns on it, in my opinion, just aren't really worth it. So does that mean it's completely worthless? Well, no. It can be used in some spots, and it's also something that can be completely based on preference, much like using any build for any weapon in the game. But in my opinion, it's just not that great for general use. Thankfully, the octobrush is one of the least gear-dependent weapons in the game, so even if you decide to use it, you aren't screwing yourself out of something necessary. I'd say that if they didn't make it to where the roll speed of the brushes and rollers stayed the same on uninkable spaces, then main power-up would actually be really good on those maps that have a lot of spaces like that. Maybe further down the road, they could buff the returns you'd see by using it, and maybe then I'd consider it. But as of right now, I do not plan to incorporate main power-up into any of my builds. It's all a combination of not great returns and the fact that rolling around isn't even that viable of an option. Whether you're approaching someone or getting away, you're still very much likely to be shot, and it doesn't matter how fast you're going. People that are good at tracking will still be able to shoot you, and in fact you're just a bigger target by rolling around. That all being said, I want to know everyone else's thoughts on main power up on brushes. Do you use it? Do you think it suits you well and helps you? I'd like to hear everyone else's experience with using it. Maybe somebody watching this video has been exposed to a situation where this might have come up, or it did come up, where they needed to have this faster roll speed, or they feel that it really does help them and suits their playstyle much better than maybe my own. So I'd like to hear everyone else's thoughts, so feel free to leave your comments below. So I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.